Hey there, cozy night owls. Welcome to an hour of spooky stories, perfect for drifting into dreamy sleep. Hit that like button and subscribe, then snuggle up, take a deep breath, and let's dive into our first chilling tale. The Faded Bell. In the village of Coldhaven, nestled in a valley where fog clung like a second skin, there stood a chapel, its spire crooked, its stones worn by time. A bell hung in its tower, tarnished and still, its clapper long gone. The locals called it the Faded Bell, and they avoided the chapel, saying its silence rang louder than sound, that it called to those who lingered too long. No one knew its maker, but the whispers said it tolled for no living soul. Elias arrived in early winter, a musician seeking inspiration in the village's quiet. The chapel was part of his rental, its pews dusty, its air heavy with age. He found the bell on his first day, its surface dull, etched with faint runes he couldn't read. At night, as he played his violin, he heard it, a low chime, soft and mournful, coming from the tower. He checked, finding the bell still, but the air around it was warm, as if it had just rung. The chimes grew nightly, forming a melody that wove into his music. Elias told himself it was the wind, but the notes were deliberate, like a song half remembered. One night, the chime became a whisper, "Hear me." He climbed the tower, his candle flickering, and found the bell unchanged, but shadows danced on the walls, forming shapes, hands, faces, eyes. His violin began to play notes he didn't choose, echoing the bell's tune, soft and pleading. Elias stayed, drawn to the chapel. He found a journal in the vestry, its pages brittle, detailing a bellmaker who'd crafted the faded bell, pouring his grief into its metal after losing his family. The last entry read, "It rings for them." Elias's music changed, his compositions filled with chords he didn't write, mournful and heavy. He dreamed of a figure in the tower, faceless, its hands on the bell, its eyes watching from the dark. One night, he played in the chapel. The chimes louder, the whisper clear. "Hear me now." The air thickened, the bell trembling without touch. Shadows moved, circling him, and his violin sang, its strings warm under his fingers. The villagers found the chapel empty at dawn, Elias gone, his violin silent on a pew. The bell was still, but on foggy nights, they hear it. A faint chime, a whisper from the tower, calling for the next to play its song. The silent loom in the hamlet of Thredwick, where the fields stretched thin and gray, there was a weaver's cottage, its roof sagging, its walls stained with age. Inside hung a loom, its threads taut but unmoving, its shuttle still. The locals called it the silent loom, and they shunned the cottage, saying the threads wove patterns no one designed, that the air hummed with a rhythm not of this world. Lydia arrived in spring, a tailor seeking a quiet place to mend her grief after a loss. The cottage was affordable, its loom a curiosity she ignored at first. But at night, as she sewed, she heard it, a soft creak, like the loom stirring, followed by a hum, low and steady, like a heartbeat in the wood. She checked, finding the loom still, its threads untouched, but the air was heavy, as if it waited. The hum grew each night, forming a pattern, like threads crossing in the dark. Lydia began to notice her sewing, stitches she didn't make, patterns forming in her fabric that mirrored no design she knew. One night, the hum whispered, "Weave with me." She touched the loom, its wood warm, and the shuttle moved, just once, threading a pattern she couldn't name. Her dreams filled with a figure, its hands blurred, weaving shadows into cloth that shimmered with faces. Lydia stayed, drawn to the loom. She found a scrap of cloth hidden in its frame, embroidered with a name, Clara, and a date long past. The villagers spoke of a weaver who'd lived there, her patterns uncanny, her disappearance unexplained. Lydia began to weave, her hands guided by a rhythm not her own. Her cloth bore faces, Eyes, hands, all unfamiliar, yet achingly close. One night, the loom moved without her, the whisper clear, "Stay and weave." The cottage seemed to breathe, its walls closing in. The villagers found the cottage empty, the loom still, its threads blank. Lydia was gone, but on quiet nights they hear a hum, a creak from the cottage, and some see patterns in the fog, faces woven in the air. The silent loom waits, its threads ready for the next to sit and weave. The frosted gate beyond a village of Ironvale, where the frost never thawed, there stood a gate, its iron rusted, its bars twisted into shapes no smith could forge. It led to nowhere, standing alone in a field, but the locals called it the Frosted Gate, saying it opened to a path no one returned from. They avoided it, whispering of a cold that clung, of voices that called from the other side. Thomas arrived in autumn, a surveyor mapping the land. The gate was part of his plot, its presence odd but unremarkable. At night, as he worked by lamplight, he heard it, a soft creak, like the gate swinging, followed by a whisper, "Step through." He checked, finding it locked, its bars icy, but the frost bore faint prints, like hands that had gripped too long. The creaks grew nightly, joined by whispers that formed words, "Come with me." Thomas noticed frost on his windows, patterns like eyes, though the air was warm. He found a key buried in the field, its metal cold, etched with a symbol he didn't know. His dreams filled with a figure beyond the gate, its form blurred, its voice a chill that settled in his bones. He stayed, drawn to the gate. He found papers in his cabin, old maps marking paths that didn't exist, all leading to the gate. One night, he unlocked it, the air cold, the whispers loud. Step through now. The field beyond shimmered, not with frost, but with something alive, moving. Thomas stepped forward, the gate closing softly behind him. The villagers found his maps, the gate locked, its frost untouched. On cold nights, they hear a creak, a whisper from the field, calling for the next to open the gate. A whispered well, in the hollow of gray stone where the earth sank and the trees leaned inward, there was a well, its stones moss-covered, its depths unseen. The locals called it the Whispered Well, and they avoided it, saying its water held voices, words that weren't meant to be heard. They spoke of those who leaned too close, who never returned the same. Anna arrived in summer, a geologist studying the land's secrets. The well was on her survey, its rim cold, its water still. At night, as she wrote, she heard it, a drip, then a whisper, soft and wet. Look down. She checked, seeing only darkness, but the air was heavy, as if the well exhaled. The whispers grew, forming phrases. Seenie. Anna noticed ripples in the well, though no stone fell. Her notes changed, filled with sketches of faces she didn't draw, eyes staring from the page. She found a locket by the well, its chain rusted, holding a faded name, Rose. Her dream showed a figure in the water, its hands reaching up, its voice a ripple in her mind. Anna stayed, speaking to the well, her voice echoing back. The villagers spoke of a woman who tended the well, lost to its depths. One night, Anna leaned over, the whisper clear, "Join me." The water was warm, pulling at her fingers. The villagers found her notebook, its pages wet, filled with faces. The well was still, but on quiet nights, they hear a drip, a whisper, calling for the next to look down. The nameless chair. In the town of Ashend, there was a house on a quiet lane, its porch sagging, its windows dim. A chair sat in its parlor, old and plain, its wood worn smooth. The locals called it the nameless chair, saying it held a presence, that those who sat in it stayed too long. They avoided the house, whispering of a weight that settled in the air. Clara arrived in fall, a poet seeking solitude. The chair was there, unremarkable but heavy, as if it watched. At night, as she wrote, she heard it, a creak, like someone shifting, followed by a whisper, "Sit with me." She checked, finding it empty, but the air was warm, as if someone had just risen. The creaks grew, joined by whispers, "Stay." Clara noticed her poems changing, lines she didn't write filled with longing. She found a note under the chair, faded, signed E. Her dreams showed a figure in the chair, its face hidden, its voice soft. One night, she sat in it, the whisper clear, "Stay with me." The air closed around her, warm and heavy. The villagers found the house empty, the chair still. On quiet nights, they hear a creak, a whisper, calling for the next to sit. The shuttered room. In the village of Mistmore, where the fog never lifted, there was a house on a hill, its windows boarded with heavy shutters. One room, at the top, was sealed tighter than the rest, its shutters nailed shut. The locals called it the shuttered room, whispering that its darkness held echoes, voices that spoke when no one was there. They avoided the house, saying the air grew thick near its stairs. Samuel arrived in winter, a painter seeking solitude. The house was cheap, its rooms cold but quiet. He ignored the sealed room at first, but at night he heard it, a creak like shutters shifting, followed by a whisper, "Look inside." He checked, finding the nails intact, but the air was warm, as if the room breathed. The whispers grew, forming words, "See me." Samuel noticed his paintings changing, shadows appearing in corners he didn't paint. He found a key under the stairs, rusted, marked with a faint L. His dream showed a figure behind the shutters, its eyes glowing, its voice a soft call. He stayed, drawn to the room, his canvases filled with faces he didn't know. One night, he pried the shutters open, the whisper clear, "Join me." The room was empty, but the air pulsed, heavy with unseen eyes. The villagers found his paintings, filled with shadows, Samuel gone. The shutters were nailed shut again, but on foggy nights they hear a creak, a whisper, calling for the next to look inside. The still hearth. In the hamlet of Emberfall, where the winds carried ash, there was a cottage with a hearth that never warmed. Its stones were blackened, its fire long dead, yet the locals called it the still hearth, saying it held a warmth no flame could match. They avoided the cottage, whispering of a presence that lingered in the ashes, calling to those who sat too long. Margaret arrived in spring, a writer escaping the city. The cottage was cozy, its hearth a curiosity she ignored. At night, as she wrote, she heard it, a crackle like embers stirring, followed by a whisper, "Warm yourself." She checked, finding the hearth cold, but the air was heavy as if it glowed. The whispers grew, forming phrases, "Stay warm." Margaret noticed her stories changing, words she didn't write, filled with longing for fire. She found a locket in the ashes, engraved with A. Her dream showed a figure by the hearth, its form blurred, its voice a soft heat. One night, she sat by it, the whisper clear, "Stay with me." The air warmed, wrapping her like a flame. The villagers found the cottage empty, the hearth cold. On quiet nights, they hear a crackle, a whisper, calling for the next to sit by the still hearth. A withered path, beyond the town of Duskwood, where the trees grew sparse. There was a path, its earth dry and cracked, leading nowhere. The locals called it the withered path, saying it moved at night, its end never the same. They avoided it, whispering of footsteps that followed, of voices that called from the dark. Eleanor arrived in autumn, a botanist studying the land. The path was near her cabin, its barrenness strange. At night, she heard it, rustles, like leaves shifting, followed by a whisper, "Walk with me." She checked, finding the path unchanged, but the air was heavy, as if it waited. The whispers grew. Follow. Eleanor noticed her notes filled with sketches of a path she didn't draw, twisting into spirals. She found a stone, etched with M. Her dreams showed a figure on the path, its form faint, its voice a breeze. One night she walked it, the whisper clear, "Stay with me." The path seemed to shift, the air warm. The villagers found her cabin empty, the path unchanged. On quiet nights, they hear rustles, a whisper, calling for the next to walk the withered path. The unseen bell. In the village of Fogmere, there was a tower, its stones crumbling, its bell unseen, hidden in shadow. The locals called it the unseen bell, saying its chimes came without cause, calling to those who listened too long. They avoided the tower, whispering of a weight in the air, a voice that lingered. James arrived in summer, a historian studying old structures. The tower was part of his study, its bell absent but felt. At night he heard it, a chime, soft and clear, followed by a whisper. Listen. He checked, finding only shadows, but the air was warm, as if the bell had rung. The chimes grew, forming a melody. Hear me. James's notes filled with symbols he didn't write, circling a name, Race. His dreams showed a figure in the tower, its voice a chime. One night, he climbed, the whisper clear, "Stay with me." The air pulsed, heavy with unseen sound. The villagers found his notes, the tower empty. On foggy nights they hear a chime, a whisper, calling for the next to listen to the unseen bell. In the hollowed frame, in the town of Greymore, there was a house with a picture frame, its glass cracked, its image gone. The locals called it the hollowed frame, saying it held shadows, faces that appeared unbidden. They avoided the house, whispering of eyes that watched from the empty glass. Alice arrived in fall, an artist seeking quiet. The frame was in the parlor, its presence heavy. At night, she heard it, a creak, like wood shifting, followed by a whisper, "See me." She checked, finding it empty, but the air was warm, as if it held a gaze. The whispers grew. Look closer. Alice's sketches filled with faces she didn't draw, eyes watching from the page. She found a note in the frame, signed E. Her dreams showed a figure in the glass, its voice soft. One night she touched it, the whisper clear, "Stay with me." The air thickened, the frame warm. The villagers found the house empty, the frame blank. On quiet nights, they hear a creak, a whisper, calling for the next to look into the hollowed frame. The clock that counted backward, in the quiet town of Hallowfield, where the days seemed to blur, there was a clock shop on a forgotten street, its windows dusty, its sign faded. Unlike the other shops, this one never closed, though no one saw its keeper. The townsfolk spoke of a clock inside, its hands spinning backward, its ticks echoing in the night. They called it the backward clock, avoiding the shop, claiming time felt wrong near its door, as if hours slipped away unnoticed. Sophie, a journalist chasing odd stories, arrived in late summer, renting a room above the shop. She noticed the clock's ticks at night, irregular, like a heartbeat slowing down. Her watch began to lag, losing minutes each day, and her notes recorded events that hadn't happened yet. Meetings, conversations, a funeral she didn't attend. She found a photograph in her room showing a woman who looked like her, standing by the clock, dated years before her birth. The shop's air grew thick, her dreams filled with a figure whose face was her own, its voice whispering of days yet to come. Sophie stayed, drawn to the clock. She interviewed locals who spoke of a clockmaker who'd vanished, his shop untouched since. Her articles wrote themselves, predicting events, a storm, a fire, that came true. One night she entered the shop, the clock's hands spinning backward, her reflection in its glass showing an older self. The air warped, time folding around her. She wrote her last note, dated tomorrow, and vanished. the townsfolk found her room empty, the clock ticking backward, waiting for the next to lose their hours. A guest who never left. In the village of Mistmore, a boarding house stood at the edge of a marsh, its walls sagging, its lights dim. It was known for a room on the third floor, always booked, though no one saw its occupant. The locals called it the guest's room, whispering that those who stayed there felt watched, their dreams haunted by a presence that lingered. They avoided the house, saying the marsh's fog seemed to seep inside, carrying a voice that wasn't theirs. Daniel, a novelist seeking inspiration, checked in during autumn. The room was ordinary, but the air felt heavy, like someone else's breath. At night, he heard footsteps pacing outside, though the hall was empty. His manuscripts began to change, new chapters appearing, written in a voice that wasn't his, describing a guest who'd stayed too long. He found a journal under the bed, its pages filled with pleas from a man named Elias, begging to leave. Daniel's dreams showed a figure in the corner, its eyes hollow, its voice echoing his thoughts. He stayed, unable to write his own words. The locals spoke of a guest who'd never checked out, his name forgotten. Daniel's chapters grew darker, detailing his own life, his fears, as if someone else wrote them. One night, the footsteps stopped, the air still, and the figure stood by his bed, whispering his name. He wrote a final page, his hand shaking, and vanished. The boarding house stood empty, the room booked, its guest waiting for the next to stay forever. A song that never ended. In the coastal town of Wave Hollow, where the sea roared endlessly, there was a cliffside cottage, its windows salt-stained. The locals spoke of a melody that drifted from it at night, a song no one knew, its notes weaving through the waves. They called it the Endless Song, avoiding the cottage, saying those who heard it hummed it forever, their eyes distant, their minds lost to the tune. Clara, a musician, arrived in spring, drawn to the sea's rhythm. She heard the song her first night, soft and haunting, slipping into her compositions. Her violin began to play notes she didn't choose, the melody taking over. She found a music sheet in the cottage, its notes unfamiliar, signed L. Her dreams showed a figure on the cliff, playing the same tune, its fingers bleeding. She hummed it, unable to stop, her own music fading. Clara stayed, her violin echoing the song. The locals spoke of a composer who'd lived there, lost to the sea. Her performances drew crowds, all humming the melody, their eyes glazed. One night, the song swelled, the air vibrating, the figure closer. Clara played until her fingers bled, then vanished. The cottage stood silent, but on stormy nights, the song drifts, calling another to hum its endless notes. The road that turned back. In the forest of Duskwood, a road wound through ancient trees, its path looping strangely. Locals called it the Turning Road, saying it led travelers back to where they started, their memories blurred. They avoided it, whispering of a voice that guided wanderers deeper. Thomas, a hiker, arrived in summer, mapping the woods. The road seemed to shift, his compass spinning, his maps showing loops he didn't draw. His journal filled with entries he didn't write, describing paths he hadn't walked. He found a stone etched with M, warm to the touch. His dreams showed a figure on the road, its voice urging him forward. Thomas walked, finding the same trees, the same stone over and over. One night, the voice whispered, "Stay." The road turned, the air thick, and he vanished. The forest grew quiet, the road waiting for the next to walk its endless loop. The face in the fog. In the moorland of Greymore, where fog never lifted, a cabin stood, its windows cloudy. Locals called it the fog's face, saying the mist formed eyes that watched. They avoided it, fearing a presence in the haze. Anna, a photographer, arrived in winter, chasing eerie landscapes. She saw faces in her photos, faint but clear, not there when she clicked the shutter. Her camera captured figures she didn't see, their eyes following her. She found a locket in the cabin, marked S, holding a faded face. Her dreams showed a figure in the fog, its voice soft, calling her name. Anna stayed, her photos filling with faces. One night, the fog thickened, a face forming outside, whispering, "See me." She stepped into the mist, camera in hand, and vanished. The cabin stood empty, the fog waiting for another to capture its face. The memory that burned in the town of Ashland, where the streets wound like forgotten thoughts. People spoke of a library with no books, only blank journals that filled themselves. They called it the burning memory, for those who read them recalled lives they never lived. Locals avoided the library, saying the pages whispered, planting memories that consumed the mind. Clara, a scholar researching lost histories, arrived in autumn. She found a journal on a shelf, its pages blank at first, then filling with her childhood, but altered, with a house she didn't know and a sister she never had. At night, she dreamed of that sister, her face blurred, calling her name. Her own memories faded, replaced by scenes of a fire she couldn't recall. A locket in her room, unmarked, held a photo of the sister. Clara's notes began to describe events she hadn't lived, written in a hand not her own. She stayed, drawn to the journals. Townsfolk spoke of a librarian who'd vanished, her memories scattered in the pages. Clara's dreams grew vivid, the sister leading her through a burning house, whispering of a life stolen. One night, the journal wrote her future, a fire, her name forgotten. She clutched the locket, the library's air hot, and vanished. The townsfolk found the journal blank again, the library waiting for the next to read its burning memories. The voice in the wheat. In the fields of Goldhaven, where wheat swayed under starless skies, a voice drifted, soft and mournful, singing no known song. Called the wheat's voice, it lured wanderers into the stalks, their footsteps lost. Locals avoided the fields, saying the voice knew their secrets. Thomas, a farmer seeking new land, arrived in summer. He heard the voice his first night, singing his childhood lullaby. His crops grew strangely, forming spirals he didn't plant. He found a ring buried in the soil, etched with L. His dreams showed a figure in the wheat, its voice his own, singing of regrets he'd buried. His journal filled with words he didn't write, confessing sins he didn't recall. Thomas stayed, unable to leave the fields. Locals spoke of a farmer lost to the wheat. One night, the voice sang his name, the stalks parting to reveal the figure. He followed, ring in hand, and vanished. The fields grew still, but on quiet nights, the voice sings, calling another to walk the wheat. The shadow that smiled. In the village of Duskwell, a bridge spanned a dry riverbed, its stones carved with faces that seemed to grin. Called the smiling shadow, it cast no reflection, only a silhouette that moved alone. Locals avoided it, saying it smiled at night, knowing their fears. Anna, a sculptor, arrived in spring, sketching the bridge. She saw the shadow shift, smiling in her drawings, though the stones stayed still. Her sculptures took forms she didn't carve, faces, grinning, familiar yet strange. A pendant by the bridge read M. Her dreams showed a shadow with her face, smiling, whispering her secrets. She stayed, carving the faces. Locals spoke of a sculptor lost to the bridge. One night, the shadow grinned wider, the air cold. Anna sculpted her own face, then vanished. The bridge stones smiled, waiting for another to cross.